Usher, Confessions. Never heard it. So I was a pretty big fan of Usher in '94 when he was working with Puffy and Devontae Swing. He and I were too young to be singing about the things that he was singing about, but that album is definitely an underrated album in Usher's catalog. Next came My Way with Jermaine Dupri, which is the album that I absolutely loved. But by the time 8701 came out, I listened to the singles and I actually liked most of them. But like I said a lot of times in this channel already, by the time the 2000s came along, I was kind of cooling on pop music, so I never really picked up the album. And while that album went 4 times platinum, that was nothing compared to the diamond-selling Confessions. And I can't say that I really love the singles from the Confessions album. I mean, I thought they were good, but they weren't better than the singles from his previous albums, so I never picked it up. My understanding of this album was always that it was a concept album where we get to hear about all his infidelities. So when the album opens with Yeah, my initial thought was, okay, this is the part of the movie that takes place in the present tense. There's going to be a record scratch, there's going to be a freeze frame, and at some point he's going to say, I bet you're wondering how I got here. But that never happens. In the first full song on the album, he meets a girl in the club. And in the second song, he's already broken up with his girlfriend. And they've been broken up so long that he's now asking to come back. While this doesn't affect the quality of the music, it does feel like a missed opportunity to tell a pretty cool story. Next we have Throwback, and I have to be honest, it's kind of hard for me to listen to this song without thinking about Jay Dilla. In fact, the only reason why I know this song exists is because I heard that Jay Dilla sampled it, and I wanted to hear what the original sounded like. Well, not the original. You know what I mean. The addition of Jadakiss on this song kind of feels tacked on, and there's a reason for that. Jay-Z was originally asked to be on this song, but he declined, probably because he was somewhere nice with no mosquitoes, golfing, sipping a cappuccino. They asked Jada, but he declined because he was working on his second album, so they released it with no rap verse. But before this album got released, it got bootlegged. So he and his record label decided that they were going to put together a deluxe version, which had a bunch of extra songs and rap verses. Between the original release and the deluxe version, Jada's album comes out and it's a smash. That's why they doubled back and got him. But I'm not 100% sure how much his verse really adds to the song. I mean, it's a cool song, but if you have Usher and Jada on a Just Blaze track, I'd rather hear a club banger. Now we have Confessions Part 1 and 2. And on the original album, Confessions Part 1 was just a 1-minute interlude. All it had was strings and piano and him singing a little bit, giving us a little background before we get into the real song. On the deluxe version, this is stretched out to 4 minutes. And if I had to choose between the two, I think I'd rather have the interlude. It gets the job done quicker, and these two songs back to back is kind of overkill. Now before we get into Confessions Part 2, I just want to say that I've never been a huge fan of Jermaine Dupri's songwriting skills. I think it's impressive that he can write for so many different artists, but most of his songs kind of sound like first drafts. Clearly the guy knows how to write a hit song, but most of his songs sound really heavy-handed. Case in point, Confessions Part 2. This is a crazy situation, and you would think that there would be a lot to work with, especially considering this is Jermaine Dupri's story himself that he's telling. But there's not a lot going on in the song. I mean, the opening chorus of the song tells you everything that you need to know, and it doesn't get much more interesting after that. Also, some of the story doesn't really make sense. In Part 2, he said he's having a baby with a woman he hardly even knows. But in Part 1, he says he's in LA with his ex-girlfriend. I'm pretty sure he knows his ex-girlfriend. But the weirdest thing about this song is that it's pretty upbeat. I mean, Usher doesn't really sound remorseful at all. But that may not be his fault. I mean, as we all know, he's not a great actor. Which brings us to Burn, which is a pretty great breakup song. It's slow and remorseful. He even breaks down and cries for a minute. This song also marks the point when Usher showed us that he has a pretty great falsetto. Out of context, great song. But in the context of this album, it's a little weird. He literally just confessed to knocking up his ex-girlfriend, and now he's taking his girlfriend by the hand and saying, you know what, maybe we should break up. Yeah, I don't think you need to convince her at all. I think you're on the same page about that one. Next is Caught Up, which is my favorite single from the album, but it's also the only single from this album that didn't chart. So what do I know? It not charting may have something to do with the fact that it does sound like a bargain bin Michael Jackson song. And as we all know, Pharrell does have a tendency to kind of try to recreate famous songs. In the next song, Superstar, he uses the metaphor of a fan loving a superstar to convey how much he loves his girlfriend. And you know this is a metaphor because he says, this is a metaphor. Wait, is that a metaphor? I think it's a simile. The next few songs are produced by Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, with the best of the bunch being That's What It's Made For. It's a great song, even though in the song he decides to raw dog it, which is exactly what got him into this predicament. And also, this would have made more sense earlier in the track listing before the confession. Can You Handle It was written by Robin Thicke, and it sounds exactly like you think it would. Do It To Me sounds like it was produced by Robin Thicke, but it was actually Jermaine Dupri and Brian Michael Cox. And it kind of sounds like a royalty-free version of The Beautiful Ones by Prince. Take Your Hand was written and produced by Rich Harrison, and it kind of sounds like a song that Rich Harrison wrote and produced a year prior called Crazy in Love. You know, I just realized I don't think Rich Harrison has had a non-Beyonce hit since 2005. And that song was basically a lesser version of Crazy in Love. I'm sure he's doing fine. The original album ends with Follow Me, which is a pretty cool mid-tempo R&B jam, but it's not something that I would end the album with. One of the bonus songs on this album was My Boo with Alicia Keys. This song is about a couple that's broken up, but even though that happened, they still have love for each other. I thought the single was fine, but it does kind of sound like something from a High School Musical. The only other bonus song that I want to talk about is Confessions Part 2 with Shine, Twista, and Kanye. I'm not going to say much about Usher's verse other than the fact that I don't think he was even trying to have any type of continuity between the two songs. What's really weird about this song is Shine's verse. Jermaine Dupri and Puff Daddy have always had a friendly or maybe not so friendly rivalry. And you can tell on this song that JD is overjoyed that he got a verse from Shine while he was in jail. In case you don't know, Shine got put in jail for shooting up a club trying to protect Puffy. And Puffy, who was supposedly the instigator of the incident, went completely free. So it's pretty safe to say that Shine is not a big fan of Puffy at this moment in time. And Jermaine Dupri is overjoyed. And I can tell that JD is overjoyed because after Shine spits his pretty uninspired 8-bar verse about how he got locked up, Jermaine Dupri says, "This is the hottest remix I ever did in my life." What are you doing? Twista gives a great performance as always, and Kanye gives a very early 2000s old Kanye verse in the best way possible. No. The main reason why this album is heralded as a classic is because before the 2000s, R&B and pop music were seen as two separate entities. And this is the album that some people say introduced the idea that pop music and R&B are the same thing. And I think that's true if you're only talking about male artists. But I would argue that Destiny's Child, and more to the point, Beyonce, had more to do with that shift than anyone of any gender. Other people point to the fact that it went diamond, which is clearly impressive, even in the 2000s when a lot of people were selling a lot of records. Selling over 10 million records is pretty big. But I think that there were a lot of things that created that situation. One, he had a record label that really believed in him. I mean, he got people to buy his album twice in 1 year. Also, he had a great tour to go with this album. Usher is one of the greatest entertainers of the 21st century with a great back catalog. Also, Crunk was still shiny and new, and Little John on Yeah was everything that we were asking for in 2004. And let's not forget that this album had a salacious backstory full of forbidden love affairs and celebrities. You take all those things and put them together, you're probably going to sell 10 million records. That's impressive, but it's not classic. Now, I don't want you to think that I don't like this album, because I really do. I think the second half of this album is pretty great. That's What It's Made For, Can You Handle It, and Follow Me are probably my favorite singles. I just think that his previous albums, especially 8701, are much better. So, have you heard Confessions? Are you still bumping it to this day? I'm going to keep reviewing albums until I run out. Please like and subscribe. Until then, I am Free Tillman, the only guy on the internet that doesn't know everything. Peace.